Picture this. It's 1949. A cold Tuesday morning somewhere outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. A man named Earl pulls his 47 Ford into a filling station, but instead of topping off the tank the usual way, he reaches into a paper bag on the passenger seat, pulls out a small glass bottle, and adds something to his fuel before the pump even clicks on. The station attendant watches, confused. Earl just smiles. 3 cents, he says. That's all it cost me. By the time he crosses into Missouri, he's still got a quarter tank left, and he hasn't touched the pump since Tulsa. So what was in that bottle? And more importantly, why don't we talk about this anymore? Before we go any further, let me be straight with you, the way Fixvival Secrets always is. What you're about to hear is not magic, and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. This video is built on historical research, driver testimonies from the mid-20th century, and a look at the basic chemistry behind older fuel methods. This content is strictly educational. Fuel systems vary by vehicle, year, and manufacturer. Modern engines, especially those built in the last 2 decades, have tight tolerances and sensitive components. What worked on a flathead V8 in 1949 does not automatically translate to a 2018 turbocharged engine. Always consult a qualified mechanic before adding anything to your fuel system. Local regulations may apply. Results depend heavily on your vehicle's condition, your driving habits, and your climate. We're not promising miracles here. We're sharing a piece of forgotten American automotive history and letting you decide what to do with it. Now, let's get into it. To understand why this trick existed, you have to understand the America of 1949. World War II had just ended 4 years prior. The country was transitioning. Rationing was fresh in people's memory. Gasoline had been strictly controlled during the war years. You didn't waste a drop because you couldn't afford to. That culture of stretching every resource didn't vanish overnight. Drivers in the late 1940s were a different breed. Many of them had mechanical backgrounds from the war effort. They understood engines. They understood combustion. And they were deeply suspicious of just pouring money into the tank without getting something back. So backyard experimentation was common. Filling station talk was real. Gearheads and farmhands and long-haul drivers compared notes the way people today swap Reddit threads. And one method kept coming up, quietly, consistently, across different states and different vehicle types. A simple, inexpensive additive that many drivers of that era believed helped their fuel burn more completely, reduce engine knock, and squeeze more distance out of every tank. The cost? Around 3 cents per treatment at the time, which in today's money is roughly $3. But here's where it gets interesting. The additive these drivers were using wasn't some exotic chemical compound cooked up in a lab. It was acetone, pure acetone. The same base compound found in nail polish remover, though what they used was far purer than the consumer product you'd find today. Now, before you stop this video, hear me out. Because the why behind this matters just as much as the what. Combustion engines run on a process that requires fuel to vaporize inside the cylinder before it ignites. The more completely that fuel atomizes, the finer the mist, the more efficient the burn. Older gasoline formulations of the 1940s weren't the highly refined blends we use today. They had more variation. They didn't always vaporize as cleanly or as completely under all conditions, especially in cold weather. Acetone, at a very small concentration, has a lower surface tension than gasoline. Researchers and chemists have noted that this property can affect how fuel droplets form and break apart inside an intake system. The theory, and I want to be clear, this is a working theory with historical anecdotal support, not a clinically proven guarantee, is that trace amounts of acetone may help fuel atomize more completely, allowing for a more thorough combustion event. More complete burn, less unburned fuel wasted out the exhaust. In a 1949 engine, with carburetor-based fuel delivery and relatively simple ignition systems, that kind of effect could theoretically be noticed by an attentive driver. And this is where most people stop looking. It's worth noting that the relationship between acetone and fuel efficiency has been a subject of informal experimentation for decades. In the early 2000s, a wave of online automotive forums began revisiting this old-timer trick. Drivers posted mileage logs. Some reported modest improvements. Others reported no change. A small number reported issues, particularly with rubber fuel system components in older vehicles. That last point is critical. Acetone can be harsh on certain rubber compounds. Older fuel hoses, gaskets, and seals, particularly those made before modern synthetic rubber standards, may not respond well to acetone exposure over time. On a 1949 Ford with natural rubber components, the story might be different than on a 1985 pickup, and on a modern vehicle with fuel injection, an O2 sensor, and an ECU calibrating every millisecond, the dynamics change entirely. This is not a trick you deploy blindly. It's a piece of mechanical history that deserves careful, educated consideration, not a bottle poured in on a dare. Over time, as fuel refining technology improved through the 1950s and 60s, gasoline became more standardized. Carburetors gave way to fuel injection. Computers entered the equation. The infrastructure of modern fuel delivery, from refinery to pump, became far more sophisticated than what Earl was working with in Tulsa. Modern systems often overshadow simpler alternatives. And that's not necessarily a conspiracy, it's just the natural evolution of technology. When something becomes automated and optimized at scale, the individual workarounds that older generations relied on tend to stop being passed down. But the knowledge doesn't disappear. It just gets buried under decades of progress, waiting for the right moment to be relevant again. And right now, with fuel prices unpredictable and drivers looking for every edge they can find, people are looking back. Hey, us, real quick before we go deeper. If you're watching this and thinking about your own vehicle, your own fuel costs, your own situation, I want to hear from you. Drop your state in the comments below. Tell me what you're driving. Tell me if you've ever heard of something like this before, from a grandparent, a neighbor, an old mechanic who seemed to know things no one else did. Because the best knowledge on this channel doesn't just come from me, it comes from people like you who carry pieces of forgotten wisdom that deserve to be shared. And if this is your first time here, welcome to Fixvival Secrets. Hit subscribe. This channel exists for exactly this kind of conversation. Practical, historical, real. Now, let's talk about how this actually gets applied. Let me be extremely clear up front. Do not experiment with your fuel system without first consulting a mechanic familiar with your specific vehicle. That said, here is what historical accounts and informal research suggests about how drivers of the 1940s through early 2000s reportedly approached this method. The acetone reportedly used for this purpose was 99 to 100% pure acetone, not nail polish remover. Consumer nail polish remover contains oils, water, and other additives that could cause issues. Hardware stores and chemical suppliers carry pure acetone, and you can expect to spend around $2 to $4 for a small quantity. Historically, the figures discussed in automotive forums and vintage driver accounts ranged from about 1 to 3 ounces of pure acetone per 10 gallons of gasoline. These are small amounts. This is not a more is better situation. Higher concentrations have been associated with problems, not benefits. Older vehicles, pre-1980, carbureted, are generally what this discussion applies to in historical context. Modern fuel-injected vehicles have sensitive sensors, tight fuel line materials, and ECU systems that may react unpredictably. Anyone who ever tested something like this historically would track mileage across multiple tanks, compare under similar driving conditions, and watch for any changes in engine behavior, smell, or performance. And any change in engine performance, unusual smell from the exhaust, or fuel system behavior is a reason to stop immediately and consult a professional. Let's be honest. If you're driving a late model vehicle with direct injection, a modern catalytic converter, and onboard diagnostics, this particular piece of history is probably more interesting as a story than as a practical application. Modern fuel systems are engineered with incredibly tight specifications. Adding anything outside of those specifications, even in small amounts, carries real risk, not just of performance issues, but of sensor damage and warranty implications. This discussion is most relevant to collectors and restorers working on pre-1980 vehicles, enthusiasts who study older mechanical systems, people in off-grid or emergency preparedness communities who maintain older equipment, and historians of American automotive culture. Climate also plays a role. Cold weather affects fuel vaporization differently than hot. Elevation matters. Driving habits matter. The condition of your fuel system matters. There is no universal answer here. There is only context, caution, and informed decision-making. And anyone who tells you otherwise, in either direction, is oversimplifying. Earl made it to Missouri on that quarter tank. Whether it was the acetone or the tune-up he'd done the week before, or just a tailwind and good highway conditions, we'll never know for certain. But what we do know is this. The drivers of that generation paid attention. They understood their machines. They didn't outsource every problem to a dealership or wait for a warning light to tell them something was wrong. They listened to their engines, to each other, and to the accumulated wisdom of people who'd driven 1 million miles before them. That's what Fixvival Secrets is really about. Not shortcuts, not magic. Practical, forgotten knowledge, examined honestly, shared carefully, and applied with respect for both the old ways and the realities of today. Everything shared in this video is for educational and historical research purposes only. Always consult a licensed automotive professional before modifying your fuel system in any way. Results vary, local regulations apply. We make no guarantees of performance or outcome. If this video made you think differently about something you thought you already understood, that's the goal. Like this video, if it earned it. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of deep dive. And coming up next, we're looking at another forgotten method from the early 20th century that old-timers swore by for keeping engines running in extreme cold. No fancy products, no dealership visit, just knowledge that used to be common and somehow got lost along the way. We'll see you there.